The call came in at 2:17 a.m., and Evan Morales was awake before the phone finished ringing. He lay in his dark apartment for half a second, heart already racing, as if his body had been waiting for permission. The ceiling fan ticked once as it slowed. When he answered, he kept his voice level. "Morales." "You're up," Sergeant Billings said. "Not a question. We've got a body, South Harbor." "You're riding with me." Evan swung his legs out of bed and stood. His badge lay on the dresser beside his wallet, where he'd placed it carefully before sleeping, like a promise that could be withdrawn if mishandled. "I'm on my way." 23 minutes later, rain slicked the windshield of Billings' Crown Vic as they rolled under the yellow spill of temporary lights. Police tape cut the alley in half, fluttering like a loose nerve. Evan took it in without staring. He'd learned that much already. The victim lay face down near a dumpster, shoes still on, one arm twisted under his chest. Male. White. Late 30s, maybe. Blood had pooled beneath the head and mixed with rainwater into a thin, pink ribbon that ran toward the storm drain. Billings killed the engine. "You see anything yet?" Evan didn't answer right away. He opened the door, felt the damp cold settle into his jacket, and stepped out. The alley smelled like wet cardboard and motor oil. "No defensive wounds visible," he said finally. "Head trauma." "Blunt force, maybe," Billings grunted. "Don't get ahead of yourself, rookie." Evan nodded. Rookie. He wore the word like a bruise. Sensitive, always there, invisible to everyone except him. The crime scene techs were already working, their movements economical. A woman in a poncho snapped photos. Another crouched near the body, gloved hands hovering, respectful. Evan waited until Billings motioned him forward. "Name's Victor Lasky," Billings said, reading from a clipboard. "ID in the wallet. Lives 3 blocks east. Divorced. No priors." Evan crouched, careful not to cross the chalk boundary. Lasky's skull was caved in on the left side, hair matted dark. The wound was ugly but precise, like someone had known exactly where to hit. "What's the time of death?" Evan asked. "ME says between midnight and 1. Evan scanned the alley. No cameras. No witnesses yet. A stack of milk crates against the wall. A broken bottle near the dumpster. Beer. Cheap. But the bottle wasn't bloody. "He wasn't robbed," Evan said. "Wallet's intact. Watch is still on." Billings glanced at him, then back to the body. "You sure you're new?" Evan didn't smile. They canvassed the surrounding buildings until dawn threatened the edges of the sky. A bartender 2 streets over remembered Lasky. Quiet. Tipped well, left alone. A night clerk at a convenience store saw him walking toward the harbor around 11:45, talking on his phone, agitated. "Who was he talking to?" Billings asked. The clerk shook his head. "Didn't hear. Just saw him waving his free hand, like he was arguing." Back at the precinct, the fluorescent lights hummed with institutional patience. Evan sat at his desk, notebook open, handwriting tight and small. He wrote everything down. Times. Names. Words like agitated and alone. Billings leaned against the partition. "You good?" "Yes, sir." "Listen," Billings said, lowering his voice. "First one sticks. Don't let it crawl into your head." Evan thought of the indentation in Lasky's skull, how rain had filled it like a cup. Understood. By mid-morning, they had a short list. Ex-wife. Employer. Recent phone records. Evan volunteered to run down the ex. Her name was Dana Lasky now. She'd kept it, which struck Evan as either stubborn or tired. She lived in a narrow duplex with peeling paint and a porch that sagged in the middle. She answered the door in sweatpants and a sweatshirt that read Community College Faculty. Her eyes were red but dry. "I already talked to someone," she said. "I know," Evan said. "I just have a few follow-ups." She studied him for a beat. "You're new." "Yes, ma'am." She stepped aside. Inside smelled like coffee and old books. Evan stood while she sat. "When was the last time you spoke to Victor?" he asked. "Last night, around 11. What'd you talk about?" Her jaw tightened. "Money. He was late on alimony. Again." "Was he angry?" "He was always angry," she said. "But not dangerous. Not like that." "Did he mention meeting anyone?" She shook her head. "He said he needed air, that he was going for a walk." Evan wrote it down. "Did he have enemies?" She laughed once, humorless. "He had opinions. That's not the same thing." Back in the car, Evan stared through the windshield as rain began again, soft this time, insistent. "X checks out," he said. "Grief seems real." Billings started the engine. It usually is. They drove in silence until Evan spoke again. "Who argues on the phone before taking a walk at midnight?" Billings glanced at him. "Someone who doesn't want to be overheard." That night, Evan stayed late. He pulled phone records, tracing the last call Victor Lasky made. The number wasn't saved. Prepaid. Burner. He felt a small, unwelcome thrill. At 11:43 p.m., Victor Lasky had called a number that pinged a tower near the harbor. The call lasted 6 minutes. Evan leaned back in his chair, the precinct quiet around him, and imagined a man walking into the rain, phone pressed to his ear, voice rising. He imagined someone listening. Evan closed his notebook and stood. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent. Inside, something had started. He didn't know yet what it was, but it knew him. Evan Morales slept for 4 hours and dreamed of rain filling a mouth that couldn't close. By the time he was back at his desk, coffee bitter on his tongue, the phone records were waiting. He spread them out, aligning columns with the edge of the desk like they might confess if treated with enough order. The burner number showed only 3 outgoing calls in the past week, all to Victor Lasky, all under 10 minutes. The last one ended at 11:49 p.m. 6 minutes later, Lasky was dead. Billings stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. "Burner's a dead end unless we get lucky." "Maybe we already did," Evan said. "Tower pings put the phone near the harbor last night. Same as Lasky." Billings scratched his jaw. "Harbor's a big place." "Not at midnight," Evan said. "Most of it's locked down." They got permission by noon. By 1, they were driving past chain-link fences and warehouses that smelled like salt and rust. Fog still clung to the water, even under the afternoon sun. They started with the closest ping, a longshoreman's bar with a cracked neon sign, closed. Next was a self-storage facility, cameras at the gate, but the manager said they only kept footage for 48 hours. Evan watched the playback twice. At 11:38 p.m., a man in a dark jacket entered on foot, hood up, face down. At 11:55, he left. Same gate, same hands in pockets. "That's our window," Evan said. Billings nodded. "Prints?" "Storage units are rented," the manager said. "We don't fingerprint." They moved on. The third ping landed them at a narrow strip of public access between 2 private docks. No cameras, no lights, just water, slapping quietly against wood. Evan stood at the edge, hands on his hips, staring into gray-green darkness. He could have met him here, or Been lured, Billings said. Evan crouched and found something lodged between two planks. He pulled it free carefully. A strip of duct tape, torn, edges frayed. Billings raised an eyebrow. You always this lucky? Evan didn't answer. He bagged it, feeling the weight of it settle somewhere behind his eyes. Back at the lab, the tape came back clean. No prints. No fibers. Just tape. They were running out of daylight when the ME called. Billings put it on speaker. Cause of death confirmed, the ME said. Blunt force trauma to the left temporal bone. Single blow. Instrument likely cylindrical. Pipe, bat, something with heft. Death was immediate. One hit, Evan said softly. Whoever did it knew what they were doing, the ME replied, or got very lucky. Evan hung up and stared at the whiteboard. Names. Arrows. Question marks. He circled the burner number again. Let's talk to his job, Billings said. People argue about money. Or secrets. Victor Lasky had worked as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping company. Cubicles, bad coffee. A manager who smiled too much. He was reliable, the manager said. Quiet, kept to himself. Any conflicts? Evan asked. The manager hesitated. There was a complaint about a missing shipment. Victor flagged it. What kind of shipment? Billings asked. Electronics, high-end. And what happened? Evan said. We audited. Everything checked out. Evan watched the man's hands. They fidgeted. Pen tapping. Did Victor think otherwise? He asked questions, the manager said. That's his job. Did anyone get angry? Evan pressed. The manager's smile tightened. You'll have to talk to HR. HR produced a name. Marcus read. Dock supervisor. Prior write-ups. Temper. They found Red at home. A small house near the freeway. He answered the door shirtless. Tattoos climbing his arms like warnings. You cops? He said. Yes, Evan said. We have a few questions, Red snorted. About Victor? Evan felt his pulse quicken. You know he's dead. Everybody knows, Red said. What about it? Did you argue with him last night? Billings asked. Red crossed his arms. Yeah, on the phone. He was accusing me of skimming. Said he had proof. What kind of proof? Evan asked. Didn't say, Red replied. Just kept pushing. Where were you between 11 and midnight? Billings asked. Red smiled without humor. Home. Ask my girlfriend. The girlfriend confirmed it, reluctantly, with eyes that slid away. They searched the house with consent. No pipes, no bats, no duct tape. Outside, Evan leaned against the car, frustration pressing down on him like humidity. He fits, Evan said. Motive, opportunity. But no weapon, Billings said. No physical evidence. And the burner? Evan frowned. Red doesn't strike me as careful enough to use one. They were quiet on the drive back. Evan replayed the details in his head, again and again, like a prayer he didn't believe in. That night, he stayed late again. He pulled financial records this time, shipping logs, audit trails. He followed Victor Lasky's work backward, tracing anomalies. At 9:42 p.m. the night he died, Victor had accessed a file he'd never opened before. A subcontractor invoice. Small company. New. Evan searched the name. It led to a P.O. box and a disconnected phone number. He leaned back, eyes burning. At 1:03 a.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He stared at it, then answered. Morales. Silence. Breathing. Controlled. You're looking in the wrong place, a man said. Evan's spine went rigid. Who is this? You should stop, the voice said. Victor didn't. The line went dead. Evan sat there, phone still at his ear. The precinct empty around him. The thrill from before returned, sharper now, edged with something else. Fear. He wrote the number down. Burner. Whoever had killed Victor Lasky knew his name now, and they were watching how fast he learned. Evan didn't report the call right away. He sat with it first, letting it cool in his hands like a hot coin. That was mistake number one. He knew that even as he did it. But the voice hadn't threatened him directly. It had warned him. And warnings, Evan was learning, were invitations. By morning, he had the burner number traced. Prepaid, cash purchase, activated 2 weeks ago. Used sparingly. Whoever it belonged to understood restraint. He brought it to Billings over stale donuts. You should have told me last night, Billings said. Not angry, just tired. I know, Evan said. I wanted to see if it connected to anything else first. Billings studied him for a long second. You don't get extra points for carrying weight alone. Evan nodded. Rookie again. Fair. They looped Cyber in. The burner had pinged a tower less than a mile from the precinct when the call came in. Close enough to walk, far enough to blend. He's confident, Evan said. Or he wanted me to know he's close. Billings pointed at the whiteboard. Let's not give him too much credit yet. They went back to Victor Lasky's work. Evan requested full access to the shipping company's server logs, not just what management had already curated. It took pressure. A warrant. Some raised voices. By mid-afternoon, Evan was deep in spreadsheets and metadata. He found it the way you find rot, by noticing what looks too clean. The missing shipment Victor had flagged wasn't missing anymore. It had been reclassified. Same serial numbers, new destination, different subcontractor. Paperwork rewritten 3 days after Victor raised the alarm. Someone laundered the shipment, Evan said. Billings leaned over his shoulder. And Victor caught it, and didn't let it go. The subcontractor name popped again. Evan dug deeper this time, peeling back shell companies until he hit something solid. A small logistics firm registered out of state, tied to a single director. Name, Leonard Crow. Crow had a record, not violent. Fraud, embezzlement, time served. Smart enough to stay clean afterward, or so it looked. He's not dock muscle, Billings said. He's a planner, and planners don't swing pipes themselves, Evan said. They outsource. They pulled Crow's phone records. No direct contact with Victor. But there it was. A burner activated 2 weeks ago. Same purchase location as the one that had called Evan. Evan felt the shape of it come into focus, the way a photograph sharpens slowly in solution. They brought Crow in just before sunset. He arrived in a tailored jacket and polite irritation. I don't understand why I'm here, Crow said, sitting straight back in the interview room. My business is legitimate. Evan watched through the glass at first, letting Billings take lead. Crow answered smoothly. Too smoothly. Every sentence was rounded, sanded down. You spoke to Victor Lasky, Billings said. Crow frowned. I've never met the man. You didn't need to, Evan said, stepping into the room. Crow's eyes flicked to him, measuring. You needed him to stop asking questions. Crow smiled thinly. Is this a theory? Evan leaned forward. It's an invitation. You can correct it. Crow said nothing. They let him walk. Not enough yet. That night, Evan went back to the docks alone. Another mistake, maybe, but he needed to see it without the noise of radios and procedure. Fog rolled in. thick, muting sound. He followed the public access strip again, scanning boards and shadows. Near the waterline, he saw it. A faint scuff mark on the wood, lighter than the rest, like something heavy had been dragged or dropped. He crouched, heart hammering, and found a metal pipe wedged beneath the dock. Rusted, old, but the end was dark, the corrosion disturbed. He didn't touch it. He called it in. The pipe matched the wound. Trace blood in the pits of the metal. Enough. Crow was arrested the next morning. In interrogation, he cracked faster than Evan expected. Not fully, just enough. "I didn't kill him," Crow said, voice finally stripped of polish. "I talked to him. I tried to scare him. That's all." "Then who hit him?" Evan asked. Crow swallowed. "I paid someone. A courier. Ex-military. No name. Cash." Evan felt a chill. "You met him at the docks." Crow nodded. "I told him where Victor would be. I didn't say kill him. I said make him listen." "One hit," Evan said. "That's not listening." Crow's eyes dropped. "He went too far." They had a partial description now. Height, build, gait. Evan pulled the storage facility footage again, slowed it, watched the walk. Something nagged at him. He overlaid the footage with another clip, security video from a gas station near the precinct, time-stamped minutes before the burner call to Evan. Same walk, same hands in pockets. The man had called Evan after killing Victor, not to warn him off the case, to see who was chasing him. Evan closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. "Billings," he said. Crow didn't hire a stranger. Billings looked up. "Then who?" Evan rewound the footage, zoomed in, sharpened the grain. A familiar silhouette emerged. Someone who already knew procedure. Someone who knew where cameras were and where they weren't. Someone who had been standing beside Evan at the crime scene, watching rain wash blood into a drain. "Someone on our side," Evan said quietly. And for the first time since the call, fear gave way to something colder. Certainty. Evan didn't say the name out loud. Not yet. Names had weight. Once spoken, they pulled consequences behind them, like chains. He printed stills from the footage and spread them across the conference table after midnight. The precinct mostly asleep. One image from the storage facility. One from the gas station. One from a traffic cam 3 blocks from the harbor. Different angles. Same man. The way his right foot turned slightly inward. The habit of keeping his hands buried, shoulders loose, head angled down. Not furtive. Comfortable. Billings stood across from him, arms folded. "You're telling me one of ours did this?" "I'm telling you someone with training did," Evan said. "Someone who knew Victor would walk, knew the docks, knew how to make one strike count." Billings exhaled slowly. "That's not proof." "No," Evan said. "It's pattern." They sat with it. The building hummed. Somewhere a printer chirped and went quiet. "Who has access to burner purchases?" Billings asked. "Anyone," Evan said. "But who'd think to use one? Who'd keep it clean? Who'd know how to scare without leaving noise?" Billings rubbed his eyes. "This is where cases die." "Or where they finally tell the truth," Evan said. "They looped internal affairs quietly. No formal accusation. Just a request to cross-reference duty rosters with cell tower pings. A narrow window. Midnight to 1. Harbor vicinity." The list came back shorter than Evan expected. 3 names. One was Billings. On duty. With Evan. Verifiable the entire time. One was a patrol officer on leave. Out of state. The third made Evan's throat tighten. Detective Raymond Ives. Ives had been first on scene. Veteran. 20 years on. The kind of cop who didn't say much but always seemed to be standing in the right place when things broke. He'd shown Evan where to stand in the alley, so he wouldn't contaminate the scene. He'd clapped Evan once on the shoulder and said, "First one's rough. You did fine." Evan stared at the name until it lost meaning. Billings swore under his breath. Jesus. They moved carefully, quietly. Ives was brought in under the pretense of a follow-up briefing. No cuffs, no scene. In the interview room, Ives sat relaxed, legs crossed, hands open on the table, gray at the temples, calm eyes. "What's this about?" Ives asked. Evan sat across from him. He felt younger here, more aware of it. "We're revisiting the timeline," Evan said. "You were near the harbor that night." Ives nodded. "Yeah. Drove by after shift. I like the water." "At midnight," Evan said. "Helps me think." Evan slid a photo across the table. The silhouette. Grainy. Suggestive. Ives glanced at it, unimpressed. "That's not me." "Walks similar," Evan said. "A lot of guys walk like that," Ives replied. Evan leaned forward. "You were also near the precinct at 1:03 a.m. Ives's eyes flickered. "Just once." "Long night," he said. "I didn't want to go home yet." Billings entered then, silent, presence filling the room. Ives looked between them, something tightening now. "Ray," Billings said quietly. "Help us out," Ives sighed. "You're chasing ghosts." Evan slid the last piece across. The pipe. Bagged. Labeled. The rust flaked in a familiar pattern. "We found this under the dock," Evan said. "You showed me that dock. You said it was a blind spot." Silence settled. Heavy. The hum of the light grew louder. Ives's shoulders dropped a fraction. He wasn't supposed to die. Evan felt it land, hard and irreversible. He was threatening to burn everything down. Ives continued. "Not just Crow. People I worked with. People who trusted me." "You took money," Billings said. "Not a question." Ives nodded. "Years ago. One time. Then it keeps happening. You justify it. You say you're steering the damage. So you made the call," Evan said. "You walked him down there." "I wanted to scare him," Ives said. "Crow hired muscle. I cut him out. Did it myself. Cleaner." "One hit," Evan said again. Ives closed his eyes. "I didn't mean." "But you knew where to hit," Evan said. "You taught recruits where to aim if it ever came to it." Ives opened his eyes and looked at Evan. Really looked at him. "You're good," he said softly. "That's why I called you. After. I wanted to know what you'd see." Evan swallowed. "You wanted to see if I'd catch you. I wanted to see if you'd stop," Ives said. "If you were like the rest." Billings stood. "It's over, Ray." Ives nodded, resigned now. "Guess it is." As they cuffed him, Evan felt no triumph, just a hollow steadiness. Later, alone at his desk, Evan wrote the final notes. The case had taken something from him. It had given him something, too. He closed the notebook. Outside, rain began again, washing the city clean of nothing at all. Now, let's begin the very next story. The island only pretended to sleep. Wind worried at the eaves of the ferry terminal, carrying the smell of brine and diesel and old kelp. Snow fell sideways, needling the dark. Elias Crow stood at the end of the dock and listened to the foghorn call out into nothing, a sound so lonely it felt deliberate. Someone had timed the murder for weather like this. People who didn't want witnesses always did. They'd found the body in the lighthouse keeper's house. White clapboard, slate roof, windows facing the black Atlantic like eyes that refused to close. Crow pulled his wool cap down and followed the constable up the path, boots crunching, breath fogging. The light above the door was on, a bare bulb swinging, casting a pendulum of shadow across the snow. Inside, the house was warm, too warm. The smell hit him first. Peat smoke and something metallic, sharp as a split lip. The living room was small and orderly, furniture placed with a precision born of long winters and little company. A kettle screamed on the stove in the adjoining kitchen, steam hissing like an accusation. "She left it on," said Constable Reed, young, earnest, cheeks raw from the cold. "We shut it off when we arrived." Elias nodded and took in the room. A man lay face down near the hearth, one arm crooked beneath him, fingers blackened with soot. Blood had soaked into the braided rug, dark and stubborn. The fire had gone out hours ago, leaving a chalky smell of ash and regret. "Name?" Elias asked. "Thomas Bell," Reed said. "Caretaker, 61, lived alone since his wife died." Elias crouched, careful not to disturb the snow tracked in by boots that weren't his. Bell's head was turned just enough to show one open eye, clouded and dull, staring at the brickwork. A thin line of blood, traced from behind the ear, down into the rug. "Cause?" Elias asked. "Blunt force," said Dr. Mara Ionescu from behind him. She was already gloved, already distant in the way of people, who had learned to keep a necessary space between themselves and the dead. Single blow. Heavy object. He was struck from behind. "No struggle?" Elias asked. "None I can see," Mara said. "No defensive wounds. He didn't know it was coming." Elias stood and scanned the room. A cast-iron poker leaned against the hearth, clean. A wooden chair lay on its side, one leg splintered. He lifted it, noting the fresh break, the dark smear along the rung. "Chair," he said. Mara nodded. "Likely." "Anyone else in the house?" Elias asked. Reed shook his head. "No signs of forced entry. Door was locked when we arrived." "So he let them in," Elias said. "Or they had a key." Reed offered. Elias moved to the mantel. A row of photographs faced the room. The lighthouse in summer sun. The same lighthouse half buried in winter drifts. Thomas Bell younger, smiling beside a woman with hair like wind-blown straw. A group shot. 4 men and a woman, standing by a fishing boat, arms slung, faces hard with weather and drink. Elias lifted the group photo. A square of clean wood beneath it, recently moved. "What's this?" he asked. Reed leaned in. "That's old." "The 5. Elias looked at him. "Local thing," Reed said. "They grew up together. Belle, the woman. Nora Pike. She runs the post office now. And 3 others. People say they were inseparable. Until they weren't." Elias replaced the photo. "Who called it in?" "Neighbor," Reed said. "Jonah Marsh. Lives a quarter-mile up the road. Heard the kettle screaming." Elias glanced at the stove. "At this hour?" Reed shrugged. "Storm carry sound," Mara straightened. "Time of death is between 8 and 10. Body temp suggests earlier rather than later." Elias checked his watch. "Nearly midnight. Anything missing?" Elias asked. Reed shook his head. "Hard to say. Bell didn't have much." Elias moved to the back room. Bell's bedroom. Bed made. Clothes folded. A small desk by the window held a ledger, its cover worn soft by years of hands. Elias opened it. Dates. Numbers. Notes in a cramped script. Tides. Deliveries. Names. He stopped at the last page. One word written hard enough to score the paper. Nora. Elias closed the ledger, back in the living room. The wind rattled the windows like impatient fingers. Elias felt the shape of the night settle around him, heavy and expectant. "Storm's getting worse," Reed said. Elias nodded. "Good," Reed frowned. "Good? Means whoever did this is still on the island," Elias said. "No boats running, no ferries, no roads out." He looked at Thomas Bell's open eye, the way it refused to look away. "Means they'll have to wait," Elias said. "Just like the rest of us." Morning arrived reluctantly, like a witness who didn't want to testify. The storm had buried the island overnight, smoothing footprints into nothing and pressing silence into every corner. Elias Crow stood on the bluff above the lighthouse and watched the sea batter itself against the rocks below. The light swept its slow arc through the snow, dutiful and blind. Someone had made sure it kept working. Someone had cared enough about routine to preserve it. That bothered him. He turned away and walked toward the village. The post office was already open. Nora Pike believed in being useful, even when the weather said otherwise. Elias found her behind the counter, sorting mail, with hands reddened by cold and age. Her hair was iron gray now, pulled back tight, her face lined in ways that spoke of wind and regret in equal measure. She looked up as the bell jingled. "I figured you'd come," she said. Elias removed his gloves. "You knew Thomas Bell." "Everyone did," Nora said. "On an island this small, you don't get the luxury of strangers." "You were close once," Elias said. She smiled thinly. "Once is a long time ago." "Your name was written in his ledger," Elias said. Her hands paused, just for a second, then resumed. "He came by yesterday," she said. "Wanted to talk." "About what?" "The past," she said. "That's what people mean when they don't want to say why." "Did you go to his house last night?" Elias asked. She shook her head. "I was here until 6, then home. Storm kept me in." "Anyone see you?" Elias asked. "My sister called," Nora said. "We talked for an hour." Elias nodded, filing it away. "Who else did Thomas see yesterday?" Nora's mouth tightened. "Jonah Marsh." Always Jonah. Jonah Marsh's house crouched low against the wind, shutters rattling like teeth. He answered the door with a mug in hand, eyes already defensive. "You found him," Jonah said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Elias said. "You heard the kettle." Jonah nodded. "Sound carries when the wind's right." "You were close enough to hear it," Elias said. "I walk by his place sometimes," Jonah said. "Check on him." "He wasn't well." "Did you go inside?" Elias asked. Jonah bristled. "No." Elias glanced past him. A wooden chair stood by the table, all 4 legs intact. "Where were you between 8 and 10 last night?" Elias asked. Jonah shrugged. "Here, alone." "Anyone who can confirm that?" Elias asked. Jonah's jaw clenched. "No." Elias watched him a moment longer. "Who were the 5? Jonah's eyes flicked away. "Kids who thought the world owed them. And now?" Elias asked. "Now there's only 4, Jonah said, and that's still too many." The 4th was Lena Calder, who ran the only bar on the island. Elias found her wiping down a counter no one had touched. She was younger than the others, but the same hardness lived behind her eyes. "They always end up back at Thomas," she said when Elias asked. "Like gravity." Why? Elias asked. Because he knew what really happened, Lena said, and because he never left. What happened? Elias asked. She hesitated. 10 years ago, a trawler went down during a storm like this. Officially, it was an accident. Unofficially, she trailed off. Unofficially, Elias said. Someone cut the line. Lena nodded. A man died. Evan Pike. Nora's brother. Elias felt the name settle. And the 5? All there that night, Lena said. All drunk, all silent afterward. Elias stepped back into the snow, with the shape of it clearer now. An old secret, shared and rotting. A name carved into paper. A man who lived alone with memory and fire. Back at the lighthouse house, Mara Ionescu met him with new information. Thomas was struck near the hearth, she said. But he didn't die there. He was moved. Moved? Elias said. Yes, Mara said. He was killed closer to the door, drag marks under the rug. Someone wanted him by the fire. For warmth? Elias asked. For theater, Mara said. Or guilt. Elias looked at the hearth again, the poker still clean. Did you find anything else? He asked. Mara handed him a small bag. Inside, a scrap of blue wool. From a coat, she said. High quality. Not old. Elias thought of Nora's heavy blue coat hanging behind the post office counter. Outside, the lighthouse beam cut through the storm again, steady and unforgiving. 4 people left. One truth waiting. Elias Crow returned to Thomas Bell's house just before dusk, when the island retreated back into itself and the snow began to fall with intention again. The wind had shifted. It came now from the sea, sharp and smelling of iron, rattling the windows as if demanding entry. Inside, the house felt smaller than it had the night before. Familiarity did that. It collapsed space, stripped away pretense. Elias crouched by the hearth and lifted the rug again, studying the faint drag marks now illuminated by angled lamplight. Thomas Bell had been moved deliberately. Someone wanted him there, by the fire, like an offering. Guilt like symbols, Mara Ionescu had said. Elias stood and turned his attention to the door. The deadbolt was old, worn smooth by decades of habit. No sign of damage. Whoever left had taken the time to lock up behind themselves. A courtesy. Or a ritual. The fishing docks were nearly invisible beneath the snow. Wooden planks swallowed by white, ropes stiff as bone. Elias walked carefully, hands in his coat pockets, listening to the low groan of boats shifting against their moorings. One trawler remained, the Mercy Bell. Its paint was chipped, its name half obscured by frost. Elias climbed aboard and moved toward the cabin. Inside, the smell of old nets and diesel hung heavy. On the table lay an empty bottle and 4 mismatched glasses, rimmed with salt and something darker. Blood. Not much. A smear. Careless. Elias photographed it and stepped back onto the dock. Someone had been here recently. Someone who remembered. Lena Calder's bar glowed like a coal in the storm. Elias pushed inside, shedding snow, and found her alone again, radio murmuring low behind the counter. "You're open late," he said. "Storm keeps the ghosts busy," Lena replied. "What do you want?" "Did the 5 ever meet here?" Elias asked. "All the time," she said, "until Thomas stopped coming." "Why did he stop?" Lena's hand tightened on the cloth. "Because he couldn't forget." "Who cut the line that night?" Elias asked. Her eyes lifted slowly. Jonah. Elias waited. He was drunk, Lena continued, raging about money, about Evan wanting a bigger cut. They argued on the deck. The storm came up fast. The line snapped, or was cut. Evan went over. And the others? Elias asked. Nora begged Thomas to lie, Lena said. Said it would kill her parents to lose another child. Thomas agreed. Jonah never thanked him. Elias nodded. But Thomas kept records. Yes, Lena said. Names, dates, tides. And recently? Elias asked. He started talking again, Lena said. About confession. About not wanting to die with it. Elias turned toward the door. Detective, Lena said quietly, this island doesn't forgive. I know, Elias said. That's why I'm here. Jonah Marsh's house was dark. Elias knocked. No answer. He tried the door. Unlocked. Inside, the air was cold, stale. Elias moved room to room until he found the coat hanging by the stove. Dark blue wool, newer than the rest of the house. He brushed his fingers along the sleeve and felt the rough tear near the cuff. Blue fibers. Elias heard the sound then. The low thrum of the lighthouse beam sweeping past the windows. And beneath it, footsteps. He turned as Jonah Marsh emerged from the back room, chair leg in his hands like a relic pulled from a grave. "You shouldn't have come," Jonah said. Elias raised his hands slowly. "You went to Thomas to stop him." Jonah's eyes were wet. He wouldn't listen. "You killed him by the door," Elias said. "Then dragged him to the fire, just like Evan. Cold, dark, left behind." Jonah's grip tightened. He deserved warmth. Elias took a careful step forward. "You didn't lock the door out of kindness. You locked it because that's what you did after Evan died. Secured the boat. Pretended nothing was wrong." The chair leg trembled. Snow howled outside. "You waited 10 years, Elias said. "But guilt doesn't drown," Jonah screamed and rushed him. They found Jonah Marsh at dawn, handcuffed on the lighthouse steps, the beams sweeping over him again and again, indifferent as the sea below. Thomas Bell was buried 3 days later, the storm finally spent. As the ferry carried him away, Elias Crow watched the island recede into gray. Secrets stayed where they were born, but sometimes they killed their keepers first. The holding room smelled of damp wool and old varnish. Jonah Marsh sat with his hands cuffed to a radiator, head bowed, the fight gone out of him like a tide pulled too far back to matter. Elias Crow stood by the window and watched snow feather the glass. "You want to talk now?" Elias asked. Jonah laughed softly. "I've been talking for 10 years, just not out loud." Elias turned. "Walk me through last night." Jonah lifted his head. His eyes were raw, red-lined. "Thomas sent for me, left a note on my door, said we needed to finish it." "Finish what?" Elias asked. "The lie," Jonah said. "He couldn't carry it anymore. Said Nora deserved the truth before he died." "And you?" Elias asked. "I deserved to rot with it," Jonah said, "but I couldn't let him speak." Elias waited. "I brought the chair leg," Jonah continued. "Didn't plan to use it. Just wanted him to see it. Remember the boat? Remember Evan's face when he went over?" "But he didn't," Elias said. Jonah shook his head. He looked relieved, like he'd been waiting for me. "So you struck him," Elias said. "Yes," Jonah whispered. "By the door. He fell wrong. Hit his head. It was over too fast." "You dragged him to the hearth," Elias said. Jonah nodded. "I didn't want him cold." Elias felt the familiar weight settle in his chest, the kind that came when motives made sense but still tasted like ash. You locked the door, Elias said. Jonah's mouth twitched. Habit. The inquest took place in the community hall. Folding chairs arranged beneath a banner that still read Winter Festival. Postponed. Nora Pike sat in the front row, hands clasped, eyes fixed on nothing. When Jonah was brought in, she stood, swayed, and sat again without a sound. Mara Ionescu testified first, then Elias. Facts laid bare, clean and sharp. No embellishment, no mercy. When it was over, the hall emptied slowly, like people leaving a church after a funeral they hadn't expected to attend. Nora lingered. I never meant for this, she said to Elias, voice brittle. Any of it. No one ever does, Elias said. He kept records, Nora said. Thomas, I knew. I just pretended I didn't. Elias nodded. Pretending is powerful. She looked up at him. Will it ever stop? Elias thought of the lighthouse beam, turning and turning. Not on its own. Thomas Bell was buried on a hill above the sea, the ground hard and unforgiving. The island gathered, coats dark against the snow, faces carved from weather and memory. Elias stood apart, listening to the wind worry the grass beneath the white. When it was done, Nora placed a small photograph on the grave, the 5 of them by the boat, young and unafraid. She hesitated, then folded it once, and tucked it into her coat instead. Some things, Elias thought, were too heavy to leave behind. That night, Elias climbed the lighthouse alone. The stairs spiraled upward, narrow and worn, each step a conversation with time. At the top, the lamp room hummed, glass panes rattling softly. He stood in the light's path and watched it sweep the dark sea. Order, routine, duty. The same comforts Thomas Bell had trusted. Elias turned the light off. For 30 seconds the island vanished. Then he turned it back on. Outside, the beam resumed its endless work, and the island reappeared, scarred, complicit, alive. The ferry left at dawn. Elias stood on deck, collar up, as the island pulled away into fog. Snow fell lightly now, almost gentle. He watched until the lighthouse became a smudge, then nothing at all. Somewhere behind him, chains clinked softly. Somewhere ahead, another place was already waiting. Elias Crow closed his eyes and let the cold take the edge off what remained. The courthouse sat low against the hill, a squat building of stone that had learned how to endure. Snow had been cleared from the steps in uneven swaths, shovel marks like scars. Elias Crow arrived early and took a seat in the back, where he could watch the room assemble itself. Jonah Marsh was brought in through the side door, wrists cuffed, ankles free. He looked smaller out of the storm, as if the weather had been lending him mass. He did not look at Nora Pike. He did not look at anyone. The prosecutor spoke plainly. So did the defense. On an island this small, there was no appetite for theater. Everyone already knew the ending. The proceeding was a formality, a way to teach the truth how to stand upright in public. When Jonah was asked to speak, he rose slowly. I killed Thomas Bell, he said. No qualifiers, no weather attached. I killed him because I was afraid of what the truth would take from me. I killed him because I didn't think I could survive being seen. A murmur moved through the benches, then stilled. I was wrong, Jonah said. I survived anyway. The judge sentenced him to life with the possibility of parole. The word possibility hung in the air like frost that refused to melt. Nora stood when it was over. She walked past Jonah without stopping, her face set, her back straight. Outside, she leaned against the courthouse wall and breathed as if learning again. Elias joined her, careful to keep a respectful distance. 10 years, she said. All that time thinking silence, was Mercy. "It's only quiet," Elias said. "Mercy does something." She nodded, eyes closed. "I don't know what comes next." "Neither did Thomas," Elias said. "He still chose it." The island changed subtly in the weeks that followed. People spoke a little louder. Doors stayed open a little longer. The bar filled on nights it used to empty early. Lena Calder took down a photograph from behind the counter and replaced it with nothing. Mara Ionescu finished her work and packed her bags. Before she left, she found Elias by the bluff. "You did what you came to do," she said. "Not everything," Elias replied. She smiled faintly. "That's how you know it was real." On his last night, Elias walked to the lighthouse again. Fog rolled in thick and sudden, swallowing sound. He climbed the stairs and stood by the lamp, listening to its steady hum. He did not turn it off this time. Below, the sea broke itself against the rocks, patient and relentless. Above, the light cut a path no one could follow for long. Elias thought of Thomas Bell, of ledgers and fires, and a man who had waited until the wait became unbearable. He thought of Jonah Marsh, of habit mistaken for necessity. He thought of Nora Pike, carrying what remained without asking anyone to share it. At dawn, the ferry took him back across the water. The island held, so did the truth. And somewhere far from the sea, another silence was already learning how to break. The ferry's engine settled into its long, patient rhythm as the island slipped behind a veil of fog. Elias Crow stood at the rail and watched the water fracture into pale seams. The lighthouse beam cut once more through the mist, then vanished, as if the island had decided it had said enough. Below deck, Jonah Marsh sat with his hands folded, chains loose but present. He didn't look up when Elias passed. Some men needed witnesses at the end. Others needed none. The mainland arrived without ceremony. The prison road ran straight and white, through fields locked in winter. Snow dusted the wire like something ornamental. Jonah was handed over without resistance. He paused once at the threshold, breath fogging, and turned to Elias. Thomas waited. Jonah said, "I rushed." Elias met his eyes. That was the difference. The doors closed. The sound was final. Weeks passed. The case became paper, then numbers, then an entry in a ledger no one would read again. The island sent no messages. It didn't need to. Places like that didn't ask to be understood. They endured. Elias took a room overlooking a river that never froze. He slept poorly. He woke early. He walked until the cold did what it always did, simplified. One morning, a small package arrived without a return address. Inside was a photograph, folded once. The five by the boat, young, unafraid. On the back, in careful script, "He told the truth in the end. Thank you for staying." Elias slid the photo into his coat pocket and went back outside. On his last day before reassignment, Elias drove north to a place where the coast narrowed and the wind learned new words. There was a lighthouse there too, shorter, newer, automated. No keeper, no hearth, just machinery and glass. He stood beneath it and watched the light rotate, tireless, unburdened by memory. The murder on the island had not been complicated. Jonah Marsh killed Thomas Bell with a broken chair leg. One blow from behind, no warning, no struggle. The method was blunt, the motive older than the winter, fear of being seen, fear of a truth that refused to stay submerged. The staging, the hearth, the locked door, was confession masquerading as care, guilt arranging the room. Elias understood that now. He turned away from the beam and walked back to his car. There would be other nights, other rooms arranged just so, other people mistaking silence for mercy. He would arrive when he was called, he would listen, he would wait, and when the truth finally asked to be let in, he would hold the door. Now, let's begin the next story for tonight. The first thing Ryan Jefferson noticed was the ribbon. Not the dead man. His brain tried, briefly, to make it about the body, because bodies were supposed to be the point. But the ribbon caught the eye in a way blood didn't. Satin, pale blue, tied in a neat bow around the wrought iron handrail leading up to the brownstone steps. It was the kind of thing you saw at charity galas or baby showers. Here, at 5:12 a.m. On a soot-stained block in Westbridge, it looked like a mistake somebody refused to correct. He stood behind the tape and watched the ribbon twitch in the wind like it was breathing. A uniformed officer lifted the tape for him. "Detective, you're good." Ryan nodded and ducked under, careful not to brush anything. He'd been a detective for 8 weeks. Long enough for his suit to start smelling like precinct coffee and cold rain. Not long enough for his nerves to stop misfiring every time he stepped into someone else's last hour. The front door of the brownstone was cracked open. A wedge of lamplight spilled onto the stoop and made the wet stone shine. Inside, the foyer was too clean for this neighborhood. Mosaic tile, polished wood, a framed black and white photograph of a bridge at night. A security keypad blinked silently, as if waiting for someone to apologize. "Who called it?" Ryan asked. Officer Nance, mid-30s, steady, checked his notebook. Neighbor across the street. Says he heard glass around 4:40, looked out, saw the door open. Didn't see anyone. Called 911. Ryan made a mental note. Glass, not screaming. He followed the trail of muted voices down the hall. Someone had opened windows. Cold air threaded through the house, carrying the faint smell of bleach and lilies. The living room was staged like a magazine spread. A cream sofa. Books stacked by color. A baby grand piano in the corner with its lid closed, as if the room didn't trust itself to make noise. A small Christmas tree, artificial, perfectly shaped, still stood by the window, even though it was mid-January. Lights unplugged, ornaments evenly spaced. And on the hardwood floor beside the coffee table, the dead man. Male, late 40s to early 50s, well-fed, well-kept. His face had a waxy, drained look. He wore a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearm, no tie. His right hand was curled against his chest. His left was open, palm up, empty. There wasn't much blood. That was the second thing Ryan noticed. Enough to stain the shirt near the ribs, dark and concentrated. No splatter, no drag marks, no frantic smears. If this had been violence, it had been controlled. A crime scene tech named Lila Grant knelt nearby, hair tucked into a cap, gloved hands hovering with a kind of practiced reverence. "Morning, Detective." Ryan nodded at the body. "Stab?" "Single," Lila said. "Lower left thorax. Likely heart or major vessel. Meal confirm." Ryan scanned the room again. The coffee table held 2 water glasses, one half full, one nearly empty. A third object sat between them, a small silver bell, like the kind you see at hotel front desks. Polished, fingerprints waiting. "Why the bell?" Ryan asked. Lila's eyes flicked to it. "We found it like that. No one's touched it." Ryan stepped closer, careful to keep his shoes on the protective paper runners. The bell had a tiny engraving on its side, an ornate A. Not an initial, more like a logo. He looked up at the mantel. Family photos. The dead man with a woman in a red dress. The same woman holding a toddler with a gap-toothed grin. A formal portrait of the dead man alone, confident smile, eyes that suggested he was always listening for the next thing he deserved. ID? Ryan asked. Wallet's in his back pocket, Lila said. Name's Adrian Leary. Address matches. Ryan felt the neighborhood click into place. People like Adrian Leary didn't live on this block by accident. They lived here because the block had changed around them, and they'd chosen not to move, or because moving would have meant admitting they were afraid. Any signs of forced entry? Ryan asked. Nance shook his head from the doorway. Door lock isn't damaged. Neighbor says Leary had a keypad installed last year. Ryan glanced toward the foyer. The keypad hadn't been pried. No wires exposed. No alarm shrieking when the door opened. Either Adrian had let someone in, or someone knew how to come in without asking. Ryan crouched near the body, not close enough to risk contamination, and studied the man's hands. Clean nails. No fresh cuts. No skin under the fingernails that looked torn. No defensive wounds that Ryan could see at a glance. He shifted his attention to the shirt. One puncture. Neat. If the knife had gone in hard and deep, the wound should have bled more. Unless the blade was withdrawn and pressure applied. Unless Adrian had been sitting quietly when it happened. Conversation murder, Ryan muttered, mostly to himself. Lila heard him anyway. That's a phrase? It's a guess, Ryan said. He stood and let his gaze travel. The windows were shut now, but one had a hairline crack near the bottom corner, like it had been tapped, not smashed. The sound the neighbor heard could have been that. Or something else. A faint chemical bite lingered under the lilies. Not industrial cleaner, something sharper. You smell that? Ryan asked. Lila nodded. Like antiseptic. We're bagging anything that might hold it. Ryan stepped into the adjoining dining room. The table was set for two. Not formal. Just plates, forks, 2 cloth napkins folded in a simple rectangle. A bottle of red wine sat uncorked, half gone. 2 stemless glasses, one with a lipstick smear. Lipstick. Red. Fresh. Ryan looked back toward the living room photos. The woman in the red dress. The lipstick could match. Or it could be someone else's attempt to suggest it matched. He turned toward the kitchen. Stainless steel, expensive appliances. Counters cleared except for a cutting board and a knife block. The knife block had one empty slot. Narrow blade, likely. His pulse tightened. Missing knife, he said. Lila stood at the threshold, taking a quick glance. We noticed. M.E. will want that detail. Bag the knife block, Ryan said, and swab the empty slot. All ready, Lila replied, not offended. Techs tolerated rookies the way you tolerated new software, annoying until it proved useful. Ryan walked back through the living room, forcing his eyes to move slow. He'd learned in his first weeks that your brain wanted to sprint. Weapon, motive, suspect. But sprinting made you miss the small things people left behind because they thought no one would look. The bell. The ribbon outside. He returned to the foyer and stared at the ribbon again through the glass inset of the door. Pale blue. Perfectly tied. Not frayed. Not cheap. The knot was symmetrical. Deliberate. Someone had stood on the stoop and taken time with it. A message. Or a signature. Whose family been notified? Ryan asked. Nance checked his radio. Not yet. We have a number for the spouse. Lieutenant's handling. Ryan exhaled and felt the cold settle in his chest. The spouse would arrive. Eyes puffy and searching for permission to fall apart. They'd ask if it was quick. if he suffered. They'd cling to the idea that pain could be measured. Ryan stepped outside and glanced up and down the block. Westbridge was waking reluctantly, a delivery truck idling, a woman walking a dog that strained toward the flashing lights. Curtains twitched. Across the street, the neighbor who called it stood on his stoop with arms crossed over a bathrobe. Late 60s. White hair, face full of suspicion and old disappointments. Ryan walked over. "Mr. Gordon." The man's voice was thin. "Gordon Yates." "Mr. Yates, I'm Detective Jefferson. You called this in." Yates nodded and looked past Ryan toward the brownstone. "Door was open. That ain't normal." "You heard glass," Ryan said. "Yeah. Like someone tapped a window, then it gave." "Did you see anyone leave?" Ryan asked. "No," Yates said, almost annoyed by the question. "I looked. I would have seen." "That's the point." Street was empty. "Any cars?" Ryan asked. Yates's eyes narrowed. "There was a van earlier." "Not earlier. Late. Maybe around midnight. Parked down by the hydrant. White. No markings. Sat there 10 minutes, then left." Ryan felt a small click in his mind. "You didn't call then?" Yates shrugged. "People Park. It's a city." Ryan nodded and wrote it down. White van. Midnight. 10 minutes. Not much, but enough to hang an idea on. "Did you ever see anyone come by with a ribbon?" Ryan asked. Yates blinked, then barked a laugh. "Ribbon? The blue ribbon on the rail," Ryan said. Yates's mouth tightened. "No, but I saw a woman on the stoop around 1:30. Thought she lived there. Dark coat, hair up. She wasn't rushing. She stood like she was waiting to be let in." "Did she get in?" Ryan asked. "I went to the bathroom," Yates said, defensive. "When I came back, she was gone." Ryan wrote, "Woman, 1:30 a.m., waiting. Dark coat, hair up." Not enough for a sketch, but enough to be real. He thanked Yates and returned to the brownstone. The ribbon was still there, pale against iron. The city's first proper daylight began to creep into the street, exposing everything that nighttime forgave. Inside, a lieutenant approached Ryan. Marla Sennett, sharp eyes, hair pulled tight, someone who looked like she never let her own life get messy. "You're led?" she asked, tone neutral. Ryan swallowed. "Assigned?" "Yes." Sennett held his gaze long enough to make him feel it. "This isn't your first as a detective, but it'll be the first with cameras and money involved. Leary's got friends." Ryan nodded. "Understood." Sennett handed him a slim folder. "Wife's en route. Name's Celeste Leary. Works for a nonprofit. You'll talk to her." Ryan took the folder. The paper felt heavier than it was. "Also," Sennett added, lowering her voice, "we got a call from Midtown. A patrol unit found something tossed in a trash can behind a bakery. Knife, wrapped in a cloth. Blood on it. They're bringing it in." Ryan felt his stomach tighten. "Any markings?" "Not sure yet," Sennett said. "But the officer said the cloth had a blue ribbon tied around it." Ryan looked through the front door glass at the ribbon on the rail, still twitching in the wind like a pulse. He didn't say anything for a beat, because if he spoke too quickly, he'd sound like a man trying to convince himself he belonged here. Then he asked the only question that mattered. Where exactly was the trash can? The trash can was 3 miles north, behind a bakery that opened at 6 and smelled like sugar and burnt coffee even from the alley. The officer who found the knife had been responding to a noise complaint, delivery truck blocking a fire lane, and noticed the ribbon first. Pale blue again, tied too neatly to belong in garbage. Ryan arrived after the blade had been bagged and logged, but the alley still held its shape. Brick walls damp with overnight mist, a single security camera mounted high and useless, angled toward the back door, not the cans. The ribbon's fibers clung to a nail on the slatted lid, a few threads torn loose where someone had pulled it free. "Anyone on camera?" Ryan asked. The patrol officer shook his head. "Nothing that helps. Bakery owner says the alley's quiet overnight. Says he heard nothing." Ryan nodded, eyes drifting to the sidewalk beyond the alley mouth. The bakery faced a bus route. People came and went all night. If someone wanted to vanish, they'd chosen well. Back at the precinct, the knife sat under bright lights on stainless steel. Narrow blade, 8 inches, balanced. The kind you used for precise work, not kitchen theatrics. Blood remained in the shallow groove along the spine, cleaned but not lovingly. Someone had washed it enough to feel responsible and not enough to feel finished. The cloth was a napkin, linen, off-white, restaurant quality. One corner carried a faint red smear of lipstick. Not the same napkin from the dining table. This one had been folded differently, creased into a square, then wrapped tight around the blade. A decision made in motion. "Bell yet?" Ryan asked. Lila shook her head. "Prints are partial. The bell's polished, which helps and hurts. We'll see." Ryan sat with the case file and let the room quiet around him. Adrian Leary. Philanthropist adjacent. Donor lists thick, with last names that bought wings and plaques. A wife who worked in the non-profit space. A home staged to suggest taste without risk. He flipped through phone records. The last call Adrian made was to his wife at 12:47 a.m., 30 seconds. No voicemail, no text after. The last incoming call was from a number that resolved to a VoIP service, masked and forgettable. 10 minutes earlier. Ryan circled it. Celeste Leary arrived just after noon. She wore black without apology, no jewelry, hair pulled back tight. She was composed in a way that read less like shock and more like triage. The kind of calm you adopted when you'd been practicing it for years. They sat in interview 2. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. Ryan placed the recorder on the table and waited until Celeste's eyes flicked to it and back. "Mrs. Leary," he said, "I'm Detective Jefferson. I'm sorry for your loss." She nodded once. "I know." He didn't fill the silence. "Adrian had enemies," she said, as if offering a concession. "Everyone does, eventually." "Did he expect someone last night?" Ryan asked. "Yes," Celeste said. "He told me he was having a conversation. That's what he called it." Ryan kept his face still. "With whom?" She hesitated. "He didn't say." "What did he say?" Ryan pressed. "That it was necessary," she replied. "And overdue." Ryan let that sit. "Did he seem afraid?" "No," Celeste said. "He seemed resolved." "Did he mention a woman?" Ryan asked. Celeste's eyes sharpened. "What woman?" "Someone was seen on the stoop around 1:30, Ryan said. "Dark coat. Hair up." Celeste looked down at her hands. "I left the house at 9, she said. "Board dinner. I came home at 2. The police were already there." "Did you see the ribbon?" Ryan asked. Her mouth tightened. "I saw it," she said. "I don't know what it means." Ryan nodded. "Did Adrian own a knife like this?" He slid the photo across the table. Celeste looked, then shook her head. "Not that I know of." "The knife block had a missing blade," Ryan said gently. Celeste inhaled through her nose. Then maybe he did. Ryan leaned back. Mrs. Leary, did Adrian ever talk about rituals? She blinked. Rituals? Objects, Ryan clarified. Symbols. Things meant to frame a moment. Celeste's laugh was quiet and sharp. You mean control? Ryan didn't answer. Adrian liked to choreograph, she said. He liked things to happen in a certain order. It made him feel safe. Ryan glanced at the recorder. Did he ever mention a bell? Celeste's eyes flicked up. No. Have you ever seen that bell before? Ryan asked. She paused, then shook her head. This time it felt true. When the interview ended, Celeste stood, smoothed her coat, and said, Whoever did this wanted him to listen. Ryan watched her leave, the door closing softly behind her. The bell came back with partials by late afternoon. One print lifted clean enough to matter, smudged but consistent, not in any database, not a criminal. Or careful. The VoIP number resolved to a burner account paid through a shell. The IPs hopped. The trail dissolved when you followed it with anything less than a warrant and patience. Ryan went back to the house that night, alone, with permission and a key. The brownstone felt different without the noise of day. The living room's careful symmetry pressed in. He stood where Adrian had fallen and tried to imagine the moment before. The intake of breath, the realization that this was not a rehearsal. He noticed something he'd missed. A faint scuff on the floor near the coffee table, a semicircle where a chair leg had been dragged back and then pushed in. The conversation had ended with manners intact. In the dining room, he examined the table again. 2 place settings, 2 napkins, but only one had been unfolded. The other remained folded, crisp, untouched. Someone had been invited. Ryan checked the trash in the kitchen. Empty. Too empty. Someone had taken care with what they left behind. He stepped into the foyer and studied the keypad. No forced entry. The code hadn't been changed. Anyone with it could come and go. Ryan pulled phone records again, this time for the house itself. Landline metadata. Keypad logs. The system recorded entries and exits, timestamps only. At 1:12 a.m., the door unlocked. At 1:18 a.m., it locked again. At 1:41 a.m., it unlocked. At 1:44 a.m., it locked. 2 entries, 2 exits. 1 visitor, then another. Or the same person leaving and returning. Ryan's pulse ticked up. He wrote the times down and checked traffic cameras nearby. A white van passed the corner at 12:58 a.m., again at 1:39 a.m. Same direction, same speed. Plates obscured by glare. The bell's engraving, an ornate A, nagged at him. He photographed it and sent it to a colleague in property crimes with a simple note. Seen this logo before? The reply came an hour later. Looks like an event bell. Catering. High end. Ask around Midtown. Ryan thought of the linen napkin, the lipstick, the careful folds. This wasn't a burglary. It wasn't rage. It was staging, done by someone who understood hospitality and how it could be turned sharp. By midnight, he had a list of catering companies that serviced the Learys, social circle, fundraisers, galas, dinners where names were badges and favors were currency. He circled one. Blue ribbon featured prominently in their branding. Satin, pale, tied in a bow. Ryan closed the file and rubbed his eyes. The case wasn't expanding so much as narrowing, like a funnel that demanded precision. Somewhere between the bell and the ribbon, someone had decided that listening would be enforced. and someone else had decided how it would end. Ryan stood, jacket in hand, and headed back out into the city, the first real shape of the story finally coming into focus. The catering company was called Aurelian Events. The name explained the bell, the ribbon, the confidence. Everything about Aurelian suggested ceremony with teeth, fundraisers that felt like coronations, dinners where donors were seated like chess pieces and made to feel grateful for the privilege. Their logo was an ornate A, looping back on itself, printed in pale blue on linen menus and satin bows. Ryan parked across the street and watched the warehouse breathe. It sat in a wedge of light between a tire shop and a self-storage facility, the kind of industrial space that existed to be overlooked. The roll-up door was down. One window glowed faintly from an office above the kitchen floor. He waited until a white van eased into the lot and cut its engine. No markings. Clean. The driver stayed inside longer than necessary, hands moving in small, restless gestures. Then the door opened and a woman stepped out. Dark coat, hair up. Ryan felt the click again. He waited until she unlocked the side door before approaching, badge out but low. Evening. She startled. Not theatrical, just honest surprise. Then she recovered. We're closed. Detective Ryan Jefferson, he said. Mind if I ask you a few questions? Her eyes flicked to the van, then back. About what? About last night, Ryan said. And about a bell. She hesitated, then nodded. Inside. The kitchen was immaculate. Stainless steel surfaces gleamed, everything in its place. A faint smell of citrus cleaner lingered, the kind used to erase evidence of work. What's your name? Ryan asked. Marisol Vega, she said. I manage operations. How long have you worked here? Ryan asked. 7 years. Ryan nodded. You cater for the Learys? Yes. When was the last time you saw Adrian Leary? Ryan asked. Marisol's jaw tightened. 2 nights ago, a planning meeting. At his house? Ryan asked. Yes. Ryan took out the photo of the bell. Is this yours? She looked at it without touching. It's ours. For service calls. Guests ring when they want attention. Did you bring it to the Leary house? Ryan asked. No, she said too quickly. Ryan let the silence work. A knife wrapped in a linen napkin with your company's folds was found behind a bakery, tied with your ribbon. Marisol closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, the calm was gone. He wasn't supposed to die, she said. Ryan felt the case tighten like a knot being pulled closed. Tell me. Marisol leaned against the counter, suddenly tired. Adrian liked control. He liked to rehearse people. He'd invite staff to his home under the pretense of planning, then humiliate them. Subtle things, comments, threats disguised as jokes. You're saying motive, Ryan said. I'm saying history, she replied. He did it to me, years ago, promised funding, then pulled it because I wouldn't. She stopped, swallowed, because I wouldn't let him rewrite me. Why go back? Ryan asked. Because he called, Marisol said. Because he said he wanted to apologize. Ryan didn't interrupt. He asked me to come alone, she continued. Said it was important. Said he wanted to clear something before a big announcement. Which announcement? Ryan asked. Marisol laughed once, bitter. That Aurelian would be replaced. He was cutting us out of his foundation's events. He wanted to make sure I understood. Ryan's eyes went to the van. You arrived around 1:30. Yes. And left, Ryan said. Then returned. Her shoulders slumped. I forgot the bell. Ryan waited. He asked for it, she said. Said he wanted the conversation to feel official. Ryan pictured the scene. the careful staging, the bell between two glasses of water. Who else was there? No one, Marisol said. Not then. But someone arrived later, Ryan said. At 1:41. Marisol's breath caught. Celeste. Ryan felt the room tilt slightly. Mrs. Leary. She came home early, Marisol said. She wasn't supposed to be there. What happened? Ryan asked. Marisol's eyes shone, but no tears fell. They argued, quietly, about money, about control, about a donor Adrian had crossed. Celeste told him he was reckless. And then? Ryan asked. And then Celeste told him to listen, Marisol said. For once. Ryan felt the word land with weight. Did Celeste have a knife? Marisol shook her head. No, Adrian did. He reached for it when the argument turned. Not at me, at Celeste. And you? Ryan asked. I stood, Marisol said. I rang the bell. Ryan blinked. You rang it. Yes, she said. It was instinct. Stupid. But when it rang, he stopped. Just long enough. Long enough for what? Ryan asked. Marisol's voice dropped. For Celeste to step in. Ryan exhaled slowly. You're saying Celeste stabbed her husband. I'm saying she took the knife from him, Marisol replied, and used it. Ryan closed his notebook. Why wrap it? Why the ribbon? Marisol's mouth twisted. Celeste told me to. She said it would look like a message. She said she'd take care of the rest. And you agreed, Ryan said. I was tired, Marisol said, and afraid. And I believed her when she said she'd protect me. Ryan nodded. She didn't. Marisol shook her head. No. They processed the arrest quietly. Marisol didn't resist. She asked for a lawyer and sat on a stool while the cuffs went on, eyes fixed on the bell now resting in an evidence bag on the counter. Ryan stepped outside as the van was impounded. Night had settled into the street, thick and patient. He made the call to Senate himself. Celeste Leary is coming in, he said. Not as a witness. There was a pause on the line. Then, on my way. Ryan drove back toward the brownstone, mind replaying the choreography. The bell. The ribbon. The second entry. A wife who arrived to finish a conversation that had been rehearsed too many times. When he reached the house, the ribbon was gone. The rail was bare, iron cold and honest. Someone had taken it down, and Ryan knew exactly who had done it and why. Celeste Leary did not ask for a lawyer when she arrived. That was the first thing Ryan noticed. She walked in to interview one in the same black coat she'd worn earlier, hair still pulled back, face composed in a way that suggested discipline rather than shock. She sat when directed, folded her hands, and waited. The posture of someone used to boards and donors and rooms where silence was a tactic. Ryan set the recorder down, but didn't turn it on yet. Do you know why you're here? He asked. Celeste smiled faintly. Because Marisol panicked. Ryan met her eyes. Because your husband is dead. Yes, Celeste said. That too. Ryan turned the recorder on. Start from when you got home, he said. Celeste inhaled, slow and deliberate. I came back earlier than planned. The dinner ended badly. Adrian had called one of the trustees during dessert and humiliated her in front of the table. I was tired of apologizing for him. You unlocked the door at 1:41, Ryan said. Yes. You knew someone was inside, Ryan said. Yes. Marisol, Ryan said. Celeste nodded. Adrian told me she was coming. He wanted me to hear the apology. Ryan leaned back slightly. You didn't believe him. No, Celeste said. Adrian didn't apologize. He reframed. Ryan let the word hang. In the living room? He asked. Yes. The bell was already on the table. He liked props. He said it made things clear who was speaking. Who was speaking? Ryan asked. Celeste's smile thinned. Him. Ryan slid a photo across the table. The knife bagged. When did this come out? When Adrian stood, she said. Marisol said something he didn't like. About the funding. About the staff. He reached under the table. Ryan watched her carefully. No tremor, no evasive pause. You took it from him, Ryan said. Yes. And you stabbed him, Ryan said. Celeste didn't correct him. He looked surprised, she said instead. Not afraid. Surprised that I would do it. Once, Ryan said. Clean. I didn't want him to suffer, Celeste said. I wanted him to stop, Ryan exhaled slowly. Why the ribbon? Celeste's eyes flicked, just briefly. Because Adrian believed in presentation. I thought it was fitting. And the bell? Ryan asked. Celeste leaned forward slightly. That was for Marisol. So she'd remember who really ended it. Ryan felt the last piece settle into place. You told her you'd protect her, he said. Yes. And then you left her holding the mess, Ryan said. Celeste shrugged. She agreed. She was scared, Ryan said. So was I, Celeste replied. Fear doesn't absolve. Ryan stopped the recorder. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ryan said, You removed the ribbon from the rail. Celeste nodded. I didn't want it misunderstood. Ryan almost laughed. Almost. You choreographed everything, he said. Even the aftermath. Celeste met his gaze without flinching. Someone had to. They arrested her quietly. No outburst, no tears, just the soft click of cuffs and the scrape of a chair as she stood. As they walked her down the corridor, she said, he would have ruined her. Ryan didn't answer. Outside, rain had begun to fall. Thin, cold, reflective. The brownstone loomed, emptied now of performance. The living room lights were off. The piano stayed closed. Later, alone in the house one last time, Ryan stood where the bell had been. He imagined the sound, small, precise, impossible to ignore. He understood then that this hadn't been about rage or desperation. It had been about authorship. Someone had decided who spoke, who listened, and who paid. And the ribbon, blue, careful, ornamental, had never been a signature. It had been a reminder. This was done deliberately. One part remained. Not the arrest, the ending. The city washed itself clean overnight. Rain pooled in the seams of asphalt and carried yesterday's noise into the gutters. By morning, the courthouse steps shone like they'd been polished by hand. Ryan arrived early, the way he always did when he needed to believe that timing still mattered. Celeste Leary waived her right to a preliminary hearing. Her attorney, efficient, silver-haired, careful with adjectives, entered a plea that turned the room procedural. No statements, no grandstanding. Just a quiet acknowledgement that the choreography had reached its last mark. Marisol Vega took the deal offered. Accessory, after the fact. Probation. Cooperation on record. Her testimony would be neat, minimal, and devastating. She'd say only what was necessary and no more, because that's what she'd learned from years of arranging tables where power pretended to be generosity. Ryan sat through it all and took notes he didn't need. Afterward, He returned to the precinct and stood in the evidence room with the last objects laid out under glass: the knife, the bell, the ribbon. Each one had been reduced to an inventory number, stripped of intention, rendered harmless by labels and seals. He picked up the bell's bag and turned it in the light. The ornate A caught and held the glare. It looked ridiculous now. Small, theatrical, emptied of authority. He remembered the sound it must have made in that room. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear enough to interrupt a sentence. Listening enforced. The knife told the truth more plainly. Narrow blade. Purposeful. No flourish. The wound report read like an apology disguised as precision. The ribbon bothered him most. Satin didn't belong in alleys or on iron rails. It belonged in rooms where people congratulated themselves for being kind. Celeste had understood that. She'd taken the language of celebration and bent it into punctuation. Ryan logged the final chain of custody form and signed his name with a pressure he didn't bother to hide. He closed the file and slid it into the outbox. The case would be cited, taught, summarized. It would become a story with edges sanded down, a lesson with bullet points. It would not include the small things. It wouldn't include the way Celeste had sat, hands folded, as if waiting for a vote. It wouldn't include the way Marisol rang the bell without meaning to, and changed the room anyway. It wouldn't include the fact that Adrian Leary had believed until the end that every conversation could be controlled if framed correctly. Ryan stepped outside into the morning and watched the city resume. A courier jogged past with a coffee balanced dangerously. A woman argued into her phone with a practiced rhythm. Somewhere, a bell rang, bus doors closing, a bike chime, a shop opening for business. None of it mattered, and all of it did. He took the long way back to his car, passing the brownstone without stopping. The rail was bare, the stoop unremarkable. New light fixtures had been installed, brighter, harsher, honest. The house had already begun the work of forgetting. At a red light, Ryan checked his phone. A message from Sinnott waited, brief and unadorned. "Good work. Take the afternoon." He didn't reply. He turned the phone face down and drove until the streets widened and the buildings loosened their grip. He parked by the river and sat with the engine off, listening to water move around concrete like it was thinking things through. The case had closed cleanly. Too cleanly, maybe. There was no ambiguity left to chase, no clever turn waiting in the margins. The truth had been said out loud and written down and accepted by rooms designed to absorb it. That was supposed to be the point. Ryan thought about the bell one last time, how its job wasn't to make noise, but to end it. How a single small sound could force a pause long enough for a decision to be made. He wondered, not for the first time, how many lives were arranged around moments like that. Moments when someone decided who spoke next. The light changed. He started the car. By the time he reached the precinct again, the rain had fully cleared. The city looked newly assembled, like it might hold together if treated carefully. Ryan grabbed his jacket and headed inside, already aware that the next call would come soon enough. Another ribbon, another bell, another room where listening would be the most dangerous thing anyone could be forced to do. He walked on anyway, because that was the job, and because someone had to hear what came after the sound. Now, let's start the final story for tonight. The snow didn't start until after the man was already dead. That mattered later, not at first. At first it was just another quiet night, in a place that had taught itself how to be quiet long before anyone asked it to. Merrill County went still after sunset. Not peaceful, still, the kind of stillness that felt like a held breath. By the time the flakes began drifting down, slow and deliberate, the farmhouse at the edge of Route 19 was already cooling. Inside the kitchen, the light above the sink hummed faintly. One bulb. Yellowed. It cast long shadows across the linoleum, which had been scrubbed too many times and still remembered every spill. Calvin Rowe lay on his back near the table, eyes open, mouth slightly parted as if he'd been interrupted mid-thought. His right hand rested on his chest. His left was curled tight around nothing. There was no blood on the walls, none sprayed, none smeared in panic. Just a dark, controlled pool beneath his head, already beginning to thicken as the temperature dropped. The chair opposite him was pulled out. Someone had been sitting there. The call came in at 9:41 p.m. A neighbor, half a mile down, complaining about a light that had been on too long. Said Calvin always turned it off by dinner. Said something felt wrong. By the time the first cruiser arrived, the snow had started to erase tire tracks almost as quickly as they were made. Inside, the officer stood very still, hands hovering uselessly near his belt, unsure what to do with the quiet. He noted the obvious things. Male, 62. Single stab wound, precise, just below the sternum. No signs of struggle. He didn't notice the glass at first. It sat on the table, half full of water. No fingerprints visible to the naked eye, but the rim was clean. Recently washed. Recently used. 2 chairs. 1 body. The officer radioed it in, his voice flattening as procedure took over. By midnight, the farmhouse was no longer quiet. Lights. Boots. Radios murmuring low. Someone brewed coffee in the kitchen without asking, and then poured it out untouched. The medical examiner estimated time of death between 7:30 and 8 p.m. Well before the snow, someone said. Yes, someone else replied, which means whoever did it didn't leave tracks. That was the first mistake. Calvin Rowe was not well liked, but he was known. Born in the county. Lived his whole life within 15 miles of where he died. Widower. No children. Retired early from a small manufacturing plant that no longer existed. He kept to himself, the neighbors said. Didn't bother nobody. That wasn't the same as being harmless. In his desk drawer, they found old correspondence, letters from the late 90s, legal paper, settlement agreements. Names crossed out in pen so hard the paper nearly tore. One name was circled, not underlined, circled. Again and again. Someone had pressed until the ink bled. The knife wasn't in the house. That mattered more than it should have. Calvin owned knives. Kitchen knives, dull and chipped. A hunting knife in the garage, still in its sheath. None matched the wound. The blade that killed him had been narrow, sharp, and familiar with flesh. Not improvised. Personal. The snow fell harder overnight, sealing the county in white. By morning, Route 19 was barely passable, and the farmhouse sat alone again. Lights off now, just another dark shape against the fields. But the quiet was gone. It had been broken carefully, deliberately, by someone who knew exactly when to arrive and exactly when to leave. And whoever had sat across from Calvin Rowe that night had not come to argue. They had come to finish something that had been waiting a very long time to be finished. They cataloged the house the way you catalog a life you don't intend to understand. Drawers opened, closets checked. Photographs lifted, glanced at, set back down, crooked. Everything was noted. Nothing was absorbed. The farmhouse resisted intimacy. It had learned how to do that. In the living room, a single bookshelf held manuals. Tractor repair, electrical wiring, soil testing, and a thin row of hardbound novels that all stopped around the same year. Someone had quit stories at some point. That was noted too, though no one wrote it down. The desk in the spare bedroom was where the work slowed, not because there was much there, but because what was there refused to be simple. Folders, old manila, edges soft with age. Legal correspondence, settlement agreements stamped and signed and dated nearly 25 years earlier. A civil case, quietly resolved. No criminal charges. No trial. The names repeated. Calvin Rowe, defendant. 3 plaintiffs. 2 struck through. 1 circled until the paper thinned. The language was careful. Injuries acknowledged. Fault denied. Compensation issued without admission of wrongdoing. The kind of document designed to make a problem stop being loud without ever making it go away. Someone had added notes in the margins. Small, precise handwriting. He knows. They won't look. Someday. By morning, the county had opinions. Some said it had to be a robbery gone wrong, despite the untouched wallet and the careful way the house had been left. Others insisted it was family, always family, even though Calvin had none left that anyone could name. The snow complicated everything. No footprints, no tire tracks. Just clean white certainty where answers should have been. At the morgue, the autopsy added nothing dramatic. 1 wound. Clean entry. No hesitation marks. The angle suggested the victim had been seated, calm, possibly speaking, possibly listening. The glass on the table became important around noon. It wasn't fancy, thick, utilitarian, something you didn't worry about breaking, the kind of glass you offered someone without thinking. It held water, not alcohol, no residue of anything else, no fingerprints usable enough to excite anyone. But it meant something. Calvin Rowe hadn't expected trouble. He hadn't poured a drink to steady his hands or brace himself. He'd offered water, hospitality or habit. The chair across from him hadn't been pulled out in a rush. It had been placed. The first real lead came from a woman who hadn't spoken to Calvin Rowe in 19 years. Her name surfaced in the old paperwork. One of the 2 names crossed out. Not circled. Just a single, angry line through it. She lived 2 counties east now. New life. New last name. When the call came, she didn't pretend confusion. "I wondered when this would come back," she said. Her voice didn't shake. That bothered the person listening more than anger would have. She drove in despite the roads, arriving with snow packed into the wheel wells, and a look that suggested she'd rehearsed this moment more than once. They sat her down in the same kitchen, hours after the body had been removed. She stared at the empty floor like she could still see him. "I didn't do it," she said, "but I'm not sorry he's dead." She told them about the factory, the night shift, the machine that jammed, the supervisor who told them to keep it moving, the man who said it would be fine. Calvin Rowe. Her hand had gone into the press. The settlement money had paid for surgeries, then pain, then silence. "He ruined lives," she said, "not just mine." "Who else?" someone asked. She named the circled one. That name was harder to find. No current address, no phone, just a trail that went cold after the lawsuit closed. The kind of disappearance that isn't dramatic enough to attract attention. But it wasn't perfect. A utility bill, paid in cash. APO Box 2, Towns South. A volunteer shift at a food pantry under a slightly altered name. When they finally found him, he was living alone in a trailer at the edge of a frozen quarry. Heat low, windows always covered. He didn't run. He didn't deny knowing Calvin Rowe. "I sat with him," he said. "Yes." He described the kitchen exactly as it had been found. The light. The hum. The glass of water. "He remembered me," the man said. "I didn't think he would." "What did you talk about?" someone asked. "The past," he replied. "The thing that never ended." They asked about the knife. He looked at his hands then. Long fingers. Scarred. "I didn't bring one," he said. "I used his." That was new. "There was no knife missing," they said. He nodded. There was one. He kept it taped under the table. "For coyotes." They checked. The tape residue was there. Old. Yellowed. Careful. Someone had known where to look. The man didn't cry, didn't justify. He spoke like someone explaining a long equation. "I didn't mean to kill him," he said. "I meant to make him say it, out loud." Say what? That he knew. That he always knew. They asked why he stayed. He looked up then, eyes bright and exhausted. "Because I wanted him to see me leave," he said. Outside, the snow kept falling, indifferent and thorough. Inside, the case closed itself not with relief, but with the quiet certainty that some things wait as long as they need to, and when they end neatly. At a table, with the light still on, they photographed the underside of the table. The tape mark was faint, almost polite, an old habit that had outlived its usefulness. The adhesive had yellowed, cracked, a place where a hand had gone again and again, rehearsed without thinking. When they peeled back the residue, nothing came with it. The knife was already gone, wrapped and waiting somewhere else. In the interview room, the man sat with his hands flat on the table. He asked for water. Someone gave it to him without comment. He drank carefully, wiped the rim with his thumb, then set the glass down exactly where it had been at the farmhouse. They didn't stop him. He told it straight through, once. No detours. No flourishes. He'd arrived before dark and waited in the truck until the light came on. He'd knocked because knocking mattered to him. Calvin Rowe had opened the door and frowned, then softened, the way people do when recognition catches up to surprise. They sat. They talked. The glass of water. The hum of the bulb. The years compressing into minutes. He kept saying he didn't remember, the man said. That's what made me angry. Not the money, not the pain, the forgetting. He'd reached under the table when the words ran out. Not fast, not sneaking. A movement that said, "I know your house better than you think." Calvin had seen it coming. The eyes gave that away. But he hadn't stood. He hadn't shouted. The knife had gone in once. Where the diagrams say. Where the body gives up without argument. "I waited," the man said. I needed to know if he'd say it at the end. "What?" someone asked. That he knew. He said. He didn't. They asked why the chair was left out. "So it would look like a conversation," he said. "Because it was." They asked why he wrote nothing. No message. No note. "Messages are for people who doubt themselves," he said. "I don't." The knife was recovered from the quarry's edge the next morning, weighted with a rock, wrapped in cloth from the man's trailer, cleaned but not well enough. It never is. When they led him down the corridor, his steps were steady. He didn't look back. He didn't ask what would happen next. Outside, the snow stopped at noon. The county exhaled and went back to its business. Plows carved black lines through white fields. Mail trucks resumed their routes. The farmhouse sat dark, for sale signs already discussed, not yet ordered. The light above the sink stayed off. Someone had finally flipped the switch. In the evidence locker, the glass was boxed and labeled, then forgotten. The tape peel was logged, the knife sealed. Nothing about the case felt unfinished. No loose ends, no lingering questions that would wake anyone at night. Just a table cleared, a chair pushed in, and a quiet that returned without asking permission. The arraignment took 12 minutes. No outbursts, no statements for the record. The man stood when told, sat when told, answered yes and no, like they were weights he trained with for years. The charge was read, the date set, bail denied without discussion. When the gavel came down, it sounded smaller than anyone expected. Afterward, people drifted back to work. Paperwork closed the rest. The file grew heavy with forms that all said the same thing in different fonts. Resolved, transferred, archived. The settlement papers from decades earlier were added for context, not consequence. The photographs were labeled and tucked away. The knife went to cold storage. The glass stayed boxed, unremarkable. In Merrill County, closure didn't announce itself. It seeped in quietly, like meltwater. By late February, the snow thinned, then retreated. Brown fields showed through in patches. The quarry ice cracked and sighed. Crows returned to the fence lines and argued with each other like they always had. The farmhouse was sold in April. A young couple from 3 towns over bought it cheap and honest. They repainted the kitchen, replaced the bulb over the sink with something brighter. They sanded the table and filled the gouges with resin, asking no one how they got there. The tape residue under the table legs stayed. They never noticed it. At the quarry, the water rose and fell with the season. The rock the knife had been tied to shifted a few inches with a thaw, and then settled again. The place forgot what it could. The man wrote no letters. He took the years as they came, measured by meals and counts, and the slow rearranging of light across concrete. When asked once, much later, if he regretted it, he thought for a long time before answering. "No," he said, "but I don't feel better." That answer was noted. Then it wasn't. In town, people stopped mentioning Calvin Rowe's name. It lost its edges, became a reference point instead of a weight. The factory he'd worked at was already a story parents told their kids about a time when things were different, which meant nothing specific at all. On a Sunday in May, the new owner sat at the kitchen table and drank water from thick glasses they bought at a discount store. The light hummed softly above them. Outside, wind moved through the fields, patient and thorough. They talked about paint colors, about fences, about where to put a chair. They did not talk about the past. It wasn't theirs to finish. It had already ended where it needed to, quietly, with the light still on and a chair pulled out just long enough for the truth to sit down.